Beep beep. Welcome, everybody, to the Court of the Edijester. Yes, the Telegraph has mentioned the WPATH files, and Kathleen Stock is the one that's done it. Now, those of you that know the history of Kathleen Stock will know the story of what happened to her. A dreadful inquisition held by these modern-day Torquemadas. Pit and the pendulum, all that stuff, right? The old swiggy doobries. Remember? No, you don't, do you? You don't know what I'm talking about. Become a warrior teacher. Buy me a coffee. Usual stuff. So here we go. The Telegraph is off with an article here from Kathleen, who I met. Lovely lady. Absolutely wonderful. Gentle and erudite and statuesque and cool as a cucumber. Spending time with her is very efficacious, I find. So here we go. The trans activist house of cards ought to be collapsing. But its followers seem to think no side effect is too severe to halt experimental surgeries on young people. That's the sort of byline there. Nice picture of Kath then. Looking thoughtful, right? For some time, it has seemed obvious that so-called gender-affirming care falls far short of established medical standards, but still, newly leaked files by the World Professional Association for Transgender Health, WPATH, vividly reinforce the point. From the mouths of doctors, we find risky experimental surgeries recommended for minors and a relative disregard for complications that in many other branches of medicine would be treated as unacceptable. Perhaps the most shocking revelation from the leaked files is a clinician prepared to recommend a radical double mastectomy for a 16-year-old girl already suffering from liver cancer, despite believing, along with the girl's surgeon and oncologist, that the cancer is probably due to the cross-sex hormones she had been prescribed. Highly debilitating side effects of surgeries and hormone treatments in young patients, including pelvic inflammatory disease, vaginal atrophy, incontinence, excruciating pain, and an increased rate of abnormal smear tests, appear to raise only vague disquiet at most. Kathleen here shares my concern that people just don't care. They just don't care. Terrible. On one conference panel, a participant acknowledges that children cannot understand what they might be losing, but the point is greeted by the audience with smiles and nods rather than the incredulous degree of alarm it deserves. We are talking about groups of people here, as Kathleen is saying, groups of people who are so unbelievably morally corrupt that I don't know what it will take to stop them. To the average outsider stumbling across this information for the first time, an outraged response comes easily, which raises the interesting question of why ethical sensibilities within WPATH seem to be so coarsened. Kath, you've got a lovely way with words, but I'm screaming bastards. Partly, no doubt, this is a result of a general fact famously observed by writer Upton Sinclair. That Upton, I think that's an unused name, we should use it again. Upton Sinclair. Namely, it's difficult to get a man to understand something when his salary depends on his not understanding it. But partly, it's also a function of the guiding myth of the modern trans activist movement, the supposed moral imperative of gender affirmation. In day-to-day life, this demand that gender be affirmed manifests itself as an expectation that a person's preferred pronouns should be used and that they get access to spaces, resources, and sports teams that best fit with their inner sense of who they are. But in the context of medicine, affirmation requires something even more serious: access to irrevocable drugs and surgeries in order to try to make a person's outer body fit with their inner feelings and ideas. You would think, wouldn't you, that most people, even those that are invested in this, and I don't mean financially, if they've got money, if they've got skin in the game money-wise, then the Upton Sinclair quote is very, very apt. But I would say that what we're seeing here is also a number of people who would rather stick their head up their backside than they would pay any attention to what's going on. It's too big. It's just too scary. It's like, what happened with eugenics. It took years to get rid of it. And says here, the justification offered in all such cases is that the practice saves lives, quite literally, because without it, a trans-identified patient is likely to suffer horribly or even take their own life. Viewed in this light, any side effects of medical treatment, no matter how severe, will seem tolerable and less serious in comparison. I don't agree, Kath. Don't think it does. I think because a few people might off themselves is not a reason to butcher kids of a particular generation, but that's just me. Unfortunately, though, the premise is fatally flawed, as Kath recognises here. There is no convincing evidence that refusing to affirm a trans-identified young person makes suicide inevitable or even strongly likely. And in fact, for some affirmation demonstrably makes mental health outcomes worse. Were this point to be properly faced, the House of Cards would fall, but thanks to decades of distortions from trans activist organisations and figureheads, the message is still not getting through. The scandal of an international organisation like WPATH may seem irrelevant to the UK, but it is not. For years, the organisation has been mindlessly cited in British medical context as a source of international best practice. And international best practice there is in speech marks for the obvious reason that it is anything but international best practice. Though the NHS has officially distanced itself, the beleaguered Tavistock GID service remains underpinned by a service specification that says treatment is in line with WPATH. Several senior clinicians in NHS gender dysphoria clinics for over 17s are also listed as current WPATH members. You would think that what we've seen over the last few days of the analysis that has been done by people, from Kathleen to Malcolm to Matt Walsh to many of the women, Redux and all Sex Matters, Fourth Wave, 11th Hour blog, you would think that everything that's been done, you would think that everything that's been done, everything that's come out, everything that's been brought forward, the first thing that any doctor in the NHS would want to do is to immediately disaffiliate any association with WPATH and any of its progeny. History will not look kindly upon these people. That's my personal opinion. I think that history will find these people to be remiss. And I was interested to see Peter Boghossian and Gad Saad and Jordan Peterson all calling for, when are we going to start to talk about prison sentences for these people? Because I think what they've done is criminal. Absolutely criminal. Kathleen says here, as her epilogue. Is it epilogue? Oh, I don't know. In short, there is much for NHS bosses to review here as a matter of urgency. For when it comes to responsibility for the healthcare of vulnerable young people, WPATH now looks seriously compromised. Now, I think Kath is right. I think what we're seeing is the falling of a twisted and wicked organisation who has willfully damaged people. Let's keep going. It's more important now than ever. We need to keep going. I'll see you later.